Sergeant No Taesun could not hear anything anymore. The ringing in his ears had swallowed every other sound. He lay face down in a pile of broken concrete and twisted metal that used to be Shelter 14, the largest civilian bunker in the northern district of New Busan. He pushed himself up with shaking arms and looked around. Dust hung in the air like fog. Small fires burned in the corners where the ceiling had caved in. The emergency lights flickered red, then died, then came back again. He called out. No one answered. Taesun crawled forward over the rubble. His left leg was bleeding badly, and his uniform was torn and black with ash. He moved past a collapsed support beam and found the first body. A woman, still holding a small blanket against her chest. There was nothing inside the blanket anymore. He closed his eyes and kept moving. He found more. Dozens, then hundreds. Families who had come to the shelter when the alarm started. Old people, children, students, workers from the farms. All of them gone. The Arrow ground troops had broken through the blast doors and burned everything inside with plasma fire. The walls were melted smooth in places. Taesun reached the communication panel near the back wall. It was cracked but still had power. He pulled himself up, entered his military code, and opened a channel to Earth. His voice came out as a whisper, dry and broken. This is Sergeant No Taesun, 4th Colonial Guard, New Busan. Shelter 14 is gone. They are all gone. Every shelter in the northern sector is the same. I am the only one left in my section. He paused. He looked back at the darkness behind him and said, Do not send aid. Send fury. The signal traveled across space at faster than light speed and reached Earth in 11 minutes. 800,000 people died on New Busan that day. The Arrow Dominion, a reptilian military empire from the outer arm of the galaxy, had attacked without warning. No declaration of war. No demands. No negotiation. They simply arrived in orbit, burned the northern hemisphere from space, and sent their soldiers to kill whoever survived. Then they broadcast the footage across every galactic communication channel. Every species in the known galaxy watched the destruction of a peaceful human farming colony in perfect clarity. The message attached to the broadcast was short. The gentle species kneels or dies. The Era had chosen their target carefully. For over 200 years, humanity had been known as the kindest civilization in the galaxy. Humans built hospitals on dying worlds. They sent food to famine zones on planets they had never visited. They brokered peace between species that had been fighting for centuries. When the Galactic Council needed someone to calm a crisis, they called humanity. The galaxy gave humans a name, the gentle species. Most alien civilizations thought humans were soft, weak, unable to fight. The Arrow Dominion believed this more than anyone. On Earth, the broadcast from New Busan arrived during the middle of the day in East Asia and early morning in the Western continents. Billions of people saw it at the same time. News channels played the footage without interruption. Families sat in their living rooms and watched their colony burn. Students in universities stopped walking and stared at screens mounted on walls. Factory workers put down their tools. Entire cities went quiet. There was no screaming. There was no panic in the streets. There were no protests or riots. Instead, something much stranger happened, something much more frightening. The entire planet simply went silent. People stood still and watched. Their faces changed, not into sadness, not into fear, into something harder, something older, something that had been sleeping inside the human species for a very long time. Grandmothers who remembered stories of old wars, fathers who held their children tighter and said nothing. Young soldiers who had never seen combat and now understood exactly why they had trained. Within 3 hours, President Bae Jin-ho called an emergency session of the United Earth Council. The Great Hall in Geneva, filled with diplomats, military leaders, scientists, and representatives from every nation and colony. The room buzzed with arguments. Some voices called for a measured response, sanctions, trade restrictions, a formal complaint to the Galactic Council. Others demanded immediate military action. The debate went back and forth, voices rising, hands slamming on tables. Then President Bay raised his hand, and the room fell silent. He nodded to a communications officer, who played Sergeant No Taesun's distress message over the speakers. The broken voice filled the hall. Every word, every breath, the silence that followed was total. No one moved, no one argued. He was not a military man. He was a former professor of interstellar law. He wore thin glasses and spoke softly in every meeting he had ever attended. He removed his glasses now, folded them carefully, and set them on the table. He looked across the room and spoke a single sentence. Recall every ambassador, close every embassy, bring our people home. The order went out within the hour. Every human diplomat in the galaxy received the same message. Come home, now. Human aid ships that were delivering medicine to 3 different alien worlds turned around mid-flight. Trade agreements were frozen. Humanitarian missions were cancelled. Communication channels were shut down one by one. Every diplomatic frequency, every train signal, every emergency aid beacon, all of it went dark. For the first time in 200 years, Earth stopped talking to the galaxy. The effect was immediate and terrifying. Species that depended on human medical aid suddenly had no supply lines. Peace negotiations that humans were supervising collapsed overnight. Trade routes that ran through human-monitored space went unpatrolled. The galaxy had not realized how deeply humanity was woven into everything until humanity pulled itself out. Counselor Preth, a tall, thin alien who had served on the Galactic Council for 40 years and had always admired humanity's patience, tried desperately to reach Earth. He sent message after message on every channel he knew. He received a single automated reply. Earth thanks the Council for its concern. No further communication is required at this time. Preth read the message 5 times. He had dealt with angry species before. He had seen threats and bluffs and political games. This was none of those things. This was calm. This was final. And that was what scared him most. Deep beneath the ice of Antarctica, in a facility that did not appear on any map or any record shared with the Galactic Council, Dr. Mono. Shin Mira sat alone at her workstation. She was a small woman with short hair and tired eyes. She had spent 15 years working on Project Godfall, a weapons development program so secret that fewer than 200 people on Earth knew it existed. She had always hoped it would stay buried. She had always prayed the weapons she designed would rust in their cases and never see the light of a star. Her screen lit up with a single encrypted message from the president's office. 2 words: Godfall active. Behind her, the lights in the massive underground chamber flickered on, row by row, stretching back into the darkness for nearly a kilometer. Sealed weapons platforms, gravity pulse generators, ship-mounted systems that could crush matter itself. Things that humanity had built in silence, in secret, over decades, while smiling at the galaxy and handing out medicine. Mira stared at the screen. Her hands were shaking. She whispered to the empty room, her voice barely louder than a breath. They have no idea what they have just woken up. Admiral Kang Do-hyun stood on the command bridge of the UES Iron Promise, with his hands behind his back and his eyes on the viewport. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and a face that never showed what he was thinking. In 30 years of military service, no one had ever heard him raise his voice. Not in training, not in drills, not even now, as the largest human war fleet ever assembled began to move around him. The Iron Promise was the flagship. It was enormous, angular, and painted in flat black that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. It had no decorations, no flags, no emblems, just a hull number stenciled in dark gray. Behind it, stretching out in every direction like a field of black teeth, were over 400 warships. Destroyers, carriers, cruisers, fast attack corvettes, and heavy dreadnoughts, all of them built in secret, hidden inside hollowed-out asteroids, buried in lunar craters, and assembled in deep space stations that the galaxy did not know existed. For 2 centuries, Earth had shown the galaxy a fleet of lightly armed patrol ships and medical frigates. That was the public fleet. The real fleet had been waiting in the dark the entire time. Kang opened a channel to every ship in the formation. His voice was steady and low, the way it always was. For 200 years, we chose mercy. We chose to build instead of burn, to heal instead of hurt. That choice was not weakness, it was strength. But today, mercy is something that 800,000 of our people can no longer receive. So we will go forward, not with hatred, not with rage, with certainty. What happened on New Busan will be answered. Prepare for jump. 400 ships activated their faster-than-light drives at exactly the same moment. The synchronized flash of light was visible from 3 star systems away. The Galactic Council detected the movement within minutes. Their long-range sensors picked up the fleet signature, and the data made no sense to them. The numbers were wrong. Humanity was supposed to have a defense fleet of roughly 60 ships, most of them converted cargo haulers and medical transports. What the sensors showed was something completely different. 400 warships carrying technology the Council had never seen before. Stealth drives that made ships invisible to standard detection. Gravity-based weapon systems, AI-controlled drone swarms that moved as one mind, and electronic warfare suites that could turn an enemy ship's own systems against it. None of this had ever appeared in any file, any report, or any trade record humanity had ever shared with the Council. It had been hidden, deliberately, for over 100 years. Counselor Preth stood in the council chamber, staring at the sensor data with a face drained of all color. Around him, ambassadors from a dozen species were talking over each other in rising panic. One demanded to know how the humans had hidden this. Another insisted the data was wrong. A third simply sat down and said nothing, staring at the floor. A young human attaché was still on the council station, packing the last of the embassy's belongings into sealed cases. Preth found him in the corridor and grabbed his arm. "How?" Preth asked. "How did you hide all of this?" The young man looked at the old counselor for a long moment. Then he said, "You spent 2 centuries calling us soft. Did you never stop to wonder how a soft species survived an asteroid that killed nearly all life on its planet? 2 global wars, a nuclear age, and a climate collapse that almost ended everything, and still came out the other side smiling. We were never soft, counselor. We were being polite." He picked up his cases and walked away. Preth stood alone in the corridor and felt something he had not felt in 40 years of galactic politics. Real, genuine fear. Far ahead of the main fleet, moving through the black spaces between stars with no heat signature and no signal of any kind, Captain Yoon Hana sat in the command chair of the UES Black Lotus. The Black Lotus was a stealth destroyer, a ship designed to be invisible. It absorbed radar, masked its heat, killed its electromagnetic emissions, and moved through space like a shadow, passing through a dark room. It was one of 12 ships in Hana's stealth squadron, and their mission was simple. Get behind the arrow lines. Disable their early warning grid. Open the door for the main fleet. Hana was 34 years old. She had short black hair and dark eyes that looked through people instead of at them. 3 years ago, she had been a rescue pilot. She flew medical transports into disaster zones and pulled survivors out of collapsed buildings and burning stations. She was good at saving people. Then, New Busan happened, and her younger brother, Yoon So-jun, who was 12 years old and collected model ships and dreamed of being an explorer, was killed in the attack. She transferred to combat duty the next day. Now she sat in the dim red light of the Black Lotus Bridge, reviewing the positions of aero sensor stations on her tactical display. 14 stations formed the Aero Early Warning Grid, a network of automated platforms that would detect any incoming fleet and alert the Aero homeworld. Each station had to be destroyed silently and simultaneously. If even one sent an alarm, the surprise would be lost. Her weapons officer, a young lieutenant named Park Eun-ji, looked over from her console. "Captain, are you all right?" Hana did not look up from her display. "My brother was 12, she said. He had a model of the UES Horizon on his desk. He built it himself from a kit. Took him 3 months. The arrow melted him with the colony." She tapped a target on the screen and marked it for destruction. "I am fine, Lieutenant." Park Eun-ji did not ask again. On the Aero homeworld, Warlord Dreth Kaul received reports of Earth's fleet movement and laughed. He was an enormous reptilian creature with scarred scales and a voice like grinding stone. He sat on a raised command throne, surrounded by his generals and advisors, and he laughed loud and long. He called Earth's response a tantrum, a desperate gesture from a desperate species. He had studied humanity for years, and everything he had seen confirmed his belief. They were healers, not fighters. Builders, not destroyers. They would come with their little fleet, make a show of force, and then beg for a negotiated peace. That was what gentle species did. He recorded a message and sent it to Earth on an open channel. "Come, little healers. Bring your ships and your soft hearts. We will add your fleet to the wreckage of your colony. The Eero Dominion does not fear mercy." He did not know that Dr. Shin Mira had already activated 3 Godfall-class weapons platforms hidden in deep space. He did not know what those platforms could do. No one in the galaxy did. 12 hours after the fleet launched, President Bae Jinho appeared on every galactic broadcast frequency at the same time. Every screen on every station, ship, and planet in the known galaxy showed his face. This alone was a technological achievement that stunned the Council. No species had ever managed to override every broadcast channel simultaneously. Jinho sat at a plain desk with a dark background. He wore no military uniform, no symbols of power. He looked like what he was, a quiet man with glasses who had been a professor not long ago. He spoke calmly and clearly. "To the Aerof Dominion, you were warned, through every channel and in every language, that the people of New Busan were civilians under Earth's protection. You were told that any attack on them would be considered an act of war. You chose Massacre. You burned our people and broadcast their deaths as entertainment. Let the record of every species watching now show that what follows is not aggression. It is not revenge. It is consequence. You chose this. We are simply answering." He paused. Then he looked directly into the camera, and something in his eyes changed. The professor was gone. Something older looked out. "To the Galactic Council and all observing species, stay out of our way." The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, in council chambers and military command rooms and civilian homes on 1,000 worlds, there was silence. The gentle species had spoken, and for the first time, no one mistook the quiet in their voice for softness. Captain Yoon Hana watched the timer on her display count down to 0. Around her, the bridge of the Black Lotus was completely silent. Every light was dimmed. Every system was running on minimal power. The ship drifted through the dark like a dead thing, cold and invisible, less than 800 kilometers from an Eero sensor station that hung in space like a metal spider. She held up 3 fingers to her weapons officer, Park Eun-ji, then 2, then 1. Then she closed her fist. 12 stealth ships fired at exactly the same instant across a span of 40 light minutes. 14 Eero sensor stations died in the same second. No explosions. The weapons were magnetic accelerators that punched tungsten rods through the stations at a fraction of the speed of light. Clean holes. No fire in the vacuum. No debris clouds large enough to trigger a backup alarm. The stations simply stopped transmitting, like 14 candles blown out by the same breath. Hana checked her tactical display. All 14 stations were dark. No alarm signals detected on any ERA frequency. The entire early warning grid that protected the approaches to ERA space had been erased in under 90 seconds, and the ERA Dominion did not know it yet. She opened a secure channel to Admiral Kang Do-hyun aboard the Iron Promise. Her report was 2 words: path clear. Kang received the message, nodded once, and gave the order. The main fleet jumped. 400 human warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in the Verov Corridor, the narrow passage of navigable space that served as the main gateway into ERA-controlled territory. Waiting for them was the ERA forward fleet, 180 warships, including 12 heavy dreadnoughts, the pride of the ERA military. The Eero had positioned them here weeks ago, expecting exactly this approach. Warlord Dreth Kael had told his admirals that the humans would come through the corridor because it was the obvious path, and obvious was all a gentle species could manage. He was right that they came through the corridor. He was wrong about everything else. The battle was broadcast across the galaxy. Hundreds of species watched from council chambers, military academies, and civilian homes. They expected a long, grinding fight. 2 large fleets smashing into each other, trading losses, wearing each other down over days or weeks, the way galactic wars always went. That was not what happened. The human fleet moved like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. Every ship was linked to a central AI coordination system that processed battlefield data in real time and adjusted formations thousands of times per second. They split into dozens of smaller groups that flowed around the ERA formation like water moving around a stone. Each group hit a different angle at the same moment, and the ERA fleet, which was built for head-on confrontation, suddenly had enemies on every side. The gravity weapons fired first. They were devices that created focused points of extreme gravitational force. Tiny, short-lived singularities that lasted for less than a second, but pulled with enough strength to crush metal like paper. The beams struck the ERA dreadnoughts and tore them apart from the inside out. Hull plates folded inward. Internal structures collapsed. One dreadnought broke into 3 pieces without a single conventional weapon touching it. Another simply crumpled, as if a giant invisible hand had squeezed it shut. The ERA fighters launched in swarms, thousands of small attack craft pouring out of carrier bays to engage the human ships at close range. They were met by human drone swarms, unmanned craft controlled by AI that moved with perfect coordination, each one aware of the position of every other drone in the swarm. The drones did not fight like pilots. They did not dodge or weave or make brave runs. They simply calculated the most efficient path to each target and executed it. The Aero fighters were fast and aggressive, but they were fighting mathematics, and mathematics did not miss. The electronic warfare systems activated next. Human ships broadcast targeted signals that infiltrated Aero computer systems and turned their own weapons against them. 3 Aero cruisers fired on each other for 11 seconds before their crews realized what had happened and shut down their targeting computers manually. In those 11 seconds, 2 of the 3 were destroyed. Counselor Preth watched the battle data streaming into the Galactic Council chamber in real time. His hands gripped the edge of his console so hard that his fingers ached. The numbers on his screen were impossible. The Eero Forward Fleet, one of the largest military formations in the galaxy, was being taken apart in hours. Not days, not weeks, Hours. And the humans were losing almost nothing. He turned to the ambassador beside him and said in a voice that was barely a whisper, they were not hiding weakness. They were hiding this. The Battle of the Verath Corridor lasted 3 hours and 47 minutes. When it ended, the entire Eero forward fleet was destroyed. 180 ships reduced to drifting wreckage and cooling metal. Earth lost 11 ships. The ratio was so extreme that several council analysts initially believed their data was corrupted. Admiral Kang Do-hyun stood on the bridge of the Iron Promise and watched the last Eero signatures disappear from his tactical display. His face showed nothing. He did not celebrate. He did not make a speech. He simply said, "Continue advance. Next objective." On the ground, the war was just as precise. Sergeant No Tae-soon, the sole survivor of Shelter 14, had recovered from his injuries and attached himself to the 7th Marine Expeditionary Unit. He landed on the surface of Vethos Prime, an Aero-occupied moon that served as a forward military base. The human ground forces moved through the aero-defensive positions with a discipline that was almost mechanical. They advanced in coordinated squads, covering every angle, clearing every building, securing every position before moving to the next. They did not loot. They did not torture prisoners. They did not destroy civilian infrastructure. They simply advanced, engaged enemy combatants, and moved on. The Aero soldiers, who were fierce fighters in their own right, found themselves outmatched, not by aggression, but by efficiency. The humans did not fight with anger. They fought with a calm, relentless focus that was far more unsettling than rage. Tae-soon carried a data pad in his chest pocket. On it was a file containing the names of every civilian killed on New Busan. After each engagement, when the firing stopped and the smoke cleared, he would take out the pad and read a name aloud, just one name, quietly to himself. His squadmates noticed. Within a week, they were all doing the same thing. Every firefight ended the same way. Silence, then a name, spoken softly into the air of an alien world. 800,000 names. They would not run out for a very long time. Back on Earth, Admiral Kang sent a request to President Bae Jin-ho and Dr. Shin Mira. The Aero homeworld's inner defense ring was heavily fortified. Conventional assault would cost thousands of human lives. He requested authorization to deploy the Godfall weapon as a tactical option, just to have it ready. Mira read the request in her underground facility beneath the Antarctic ice. She sat alone in the dim light of her office, surrounded by screens showing data from weapons systems she had spent 15 years designing. She picked up a secure line and called President Bae directly. "If we use this weapon," she said, "even once, even on an empty target, we can never go back to who we were. The galaxy will know what we can do. Every species will look at us differently forever." Jin-ho was quiet for a long time. She could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. Finally he said, "Mira, can we go back to who we were now, after New Busan, after what we have already done in the corridor?" She had no answer for that. On the Eero homeworld, Warlord Dreth Kael was no longer laughing. His forward fleet was gone. His early warning grid was blind. His colonial garrisons were being overwhelmed, one by one. Reports came in every hour, each one worse than the last. Human ships were moving through aerospace with a speed and precision that his military planners had said was impossible. He stood in his command chamber, staring at a tactical map that showed 3 human fleet groups closing in on his homeworld from 3 different directions. The operation name was displayed at the bottom of the map, in small, clean human text. Operation Long Memory. An aide asked him for orders. Kael said nothing. He stared at the map, and for the first time in his life, he felt something cold settle in his chest. He did not have a word for it. His species had never needed one. But humans had a word for it. They called it dread. The Aero homeworld had 2 moons. Now it had 400 new ones. The human fleet arrived in 3 waves, from 3 directions and formed a perfect ring around the planet. Every ship took its assigned position and stopped. The formation was so precise that from the surface of the Arrow world, the ships looked like a necklace of black dots hanging motionless against the stars. They blocked out familiar constellations. They changed the shape of the night sky. And then they did nothing. No bombardment, no landing craft, no ultimatum broadcast. The ships simply sat there in silence. 400 warships carrying enough firepower to turn the planet's surface into glass. And they did not fire a single shot. They waited. The effect on the Arrow population was worse than any weapon could have been. 9 billion people looked up at their sky and saw death sitting quietly above them, patient and unhurried. Panic spread through every city. Military units began deserting their posts. Soldiers who had been brave enough to face any enemy in battle found that they could not face the silence. An enemy that screams and charges can be fought. An enemy that surrounds you and simply watches, that breaks something deeper. Counselor Preth arrived at the human blockade 3 days later, accompanied by 11 other alien ambassadors from the Galactic Council. They came aboard a diplomatic shuttle with all its weapons removed and its shields down, broadcasting peace signals on every frequency. Admiral Kang Do-hyun granted them permission to dock with the Iron Promise. Kang received them in a small meeting room. He was polite. He offered them tea, which was brewed properly and served in simple white cups. He listened carefully as Preth made his case. The Council wanted negotiations. They wanted a ceasefire. They wanted humanity to step back from the edge and allow diplomacy to work. Preth spoke for nearly 20 minutes, his voice calm and reasonable, calling on every argument he had used in 40 years of galactic politics. When he finished, Kang set down his teacup and asked a single question. "Counselor, where was this council when our children were burning?" Preth opened his mouth. No words came out. Kang continued in the same quiet, even voice. "We sent the council 14 separate warnings about Arrow military buildup near New Busan. 14, over a period of 8 months. Each warning was acknowledged. None were acted upon. We requested a council security resolution. It was delayed 3 times by procedural votes. We asked for a peacekeeping force. The request was tabled. And while your council debated and delayed, 800,000 of our people were murdered." He picked up his teacup again. "You may observe what happens next. You may not interfere." The ambassadors left the Iron Promise in silence. As the shuttle pulled away, one of the younger ambassadors turned to Preth and asked, "What do we do now?" Preth stared out the viewport at the ring of black ships and said, "We watch, and we pray they are still the species we thought they were." On the far side of the blockade, Captain Yoon Hana's stealth squadron was running patrol sweeps to prevent any Arrow ships from escaping the cordon. On the 4th day of the siege, her sensors detected a small transport ship trying to slip through a gap between 2 cruisers. The ship was civilian, no weapons, no military transponder, a standard passenger vessel, old and slow. Hana moved the Black Lotus to intercept. As they closed the distance, her communications officer picked up a transmission from the transport. It was not a military code. It was a civilian distress frequency. The ship was carrying refugees, elderly, young, families with children. They were trying to flee. Her weapons officer, Park Eun-ji, looked at her and waited. The standing orders were clear. Nothing leaves the blockade without authorization. Eun-ji's hand rested near her console. All she needed was the word. Hana stared at the scanner. She could see the life signs on the transport. Over 300. Most of them were small. Children. She thought about her brother, Sojun, 12 years old, loved model ships, killed without mercy by people who looked just like the ones on that transport. She felt something hot and sharp rise up inside her chest, and for a moment, just a moment, her hand moved toward the weapons console. Then she stopped. She closed her eyes. She breathed. She opened a channel. Aero transport, this is the UES Black Lotus. You are cleared to pass. Adjust your course to the following coordinates for humanitarian processing. You will be given food, medical attention, and safe holding until the conflict is resolved. Do not change from the assigned path. Unji looked at her with wide eyes. Hana did not look back. She said, quietly, "We are not them. That is the entire point." The transport passed through the blockade. Hana watched it go until it disappeared from her screen. Then she returned to her patrol route without another word. On Earth, President Bei Jinho broadcast his terms to the Aero homeworld. The transmission was sent on every frequency in every Aero language. He spoke slowly and clearly, so there could be no misunderstanding. Immediate and unconditional surrender of all Aero military forces. The handover of Warlord Dreth Kaol and his entire command staff to face trial for war crimes. Full financial and material reparations to the survivors and families of the New Busan Massacre. The permanent disarmament of all Aero offensive military capability. And one final condition. The Aerov Dominion would publicly broadcast, without editing, the full testimony of every surviving witness from New Busan, including Sergeant No Tae-sun, so that every Aerov citizen would hear exactly what their military had done in their name. Jinho paused at the end of the transmission. Then he added, "You will notice that we have not demanded your destruction. We have the power to do so. We choose not to. Do not mistake this for weakness a second time." The terms landed on the Aerov homeworld like a bomb. The civilian population, already broken by days of staring at the silent fleet above them, began demanding that their leaders accept. Protests filled the streets of every major city. But Warlord Dreth Kaol was not finished. In a deep bunker beneath the capital, Kaol activated his final weapon, a long-range antimatter torpedo that had been hidden in a deep space facility far outside the blockade. The weapon was aimed at Earth itself. Kaol sent a message to Admiral Kang on an open channel. His voice was ragged but defiant. "If the Aerof fall, your cradle burns with us. Withdraw your fleet, or your homeworld becomes ash." The message reached Kang on the bridge of the Iron Promise. Every officer on the bridge turned to look at their admiral. Kang read the message. His expression did not change. He reached for his communication panel and opened a channel to Dr. Shin Mira. "Doctor," he said, "it is time." Mira was already at her console. She had been waiting for this moment and dreading it in equal measure. Her fingers moved across the controls. Deep in space, a Godfall weapons platform powered up. It was a massive structure, hidden inside an asteroid, built around a gravity pulse generator that could create a focused gravitational wave powerful enough to collapse solid matter into itself. It crossed the distance to the antimatter torpedo in seconds, and struck it with a gravitational force so concentrated that the torpedo, its fuel, its warhead, and the space around it simply folded inward and vanished. A weapon capable of destroying a planet was crushed into a point smaller than a grain of sand. Harmlessly, silently, gone. Then, as a demonstration, a second pulse was aimed at an uninhabited Aero military moon. A barren rock, used as a weapons storage facility. The entire galaxy watched through long-range sensors as the moon bent. There was no explosion, no fire. The moon simply curved inward, folded over itself like a piece of cloth being crumpled in a fist, and collapsed into nothing. Where a moon had been, there was empty space. The gravitational ripple from its destruction was detected by sensors across half the galaxy. Every species that was watching understood the same thing at the same time. Humanity could do that to a planet, to any planet, to their planet. And they had kept this power hidden, unused, locked away in the dark for decades. While they were building hospitals and sending food and smiling at the galaxy, they had been sitting on the power to end worlds. Mira shut down her console. She stood up from her chair, walked out of the control room, and did not look back. She did not celebrate. She did not speak. She went to her quarters, sat on the edge of her bed, and stared at the wall. On the Eero homeworld, Dreth Kaol watched his last weapon disappear from existence. He watched his military moon cease to exist. He sat in his command chamber, and the room was empty. His generals had left. His guards had abandoned their posts. The sounds of rioting echoed from somewhere above. He was alone. He reached for the communication panel. He was tired. His scales were dull. His eyes, which had burned with arrogance and contempt for as long as anyone could remember, were flat and empty. He opened a channel to every frequency and spoke a single word. Enough. 6 months after the surrender, the galaxy gathered to watch the trial. The tribunal was held on a neutral station in deep space, far from both Earth and the Aeroth homeworld. The chamber was vast, built to hold representatives from every species in the Galactic Council, and every seat was filled. Cameras broadcast the proceedings to billions of screens across the galaxy. At the center of the room, behind a simple metal barrier, sat Warlord Dreth Kaol. He was thinner now. His scales had lost their color. His wrists were bound with magnetic restraints, and he sat with his shoulders hunched forward, like an animal that had forgotten how to stand tall. He did not look at the gallery. He did not look at anyone. The prosecution called its witnesses one by one, scientists who had analyzed the orbital bombardment patterns, and confirmed that the Aeroth had deliberately targeted shelters and hospitals first. Military analysts who proved that the attack was planned months in advance. Survivors who had been pulled from the wreckage with burns covering most of their bodies. Each witness told their story, and the chamber listened in heavy silence. Then, Sergeant No Tae-sun was called to the stand. He walked to the front of the chamber in his dress uniform. He was clean and neat, his back straight, but there was something in his face that went beyond tiredness. It was the look of a man who had been carrying a weight for so long that it had become part of his bones. He sat down, adjusted the microphone, and opened his datapad. He did not make a speech. He did not describe what he had seen in Shelter 14. He simply began reading names. Kwon Minji, age 7, a pause. Cho Jae-won, age 43, another pause. Lee So-hee, age 19, another. He read every name, every single one. 800,000 names with ages. It took 14 hours. He did not stop for food or water. His voice grew hoarse after the 3rd hour and cracked after the 6th. But he kept going. The chamber remained full the entire time. No one left. Ambassadors who had planned to attend for only an hour sat through all 14. Some wept. Some simply stared. The Aero representatives in the gallery sat rigid and motionless as the names of the dead filled the air around them like falling snow. When Tae-sun finally reached the last name, he closed his datapad. The chamber was completely silent. He looked across the room at Dreth Kaol, and the two of them stared at each other for a long time. Then Tae-sun spoke, his voice barely a whisper that the microphones carried to every corner of the room. I wanted to kill you. Every day since New Busan, I wanted to find you and end your life with my hands. But the dead do not need a butcher. They need a witness. So I gave them one. Dreth Kaol, for the first time since the trial began, looked away. His mouth moved slightly, but no sound came out. The tribunal found Kaol and 17 members of his command staff guilty of crimes against sentient life. They were sentenced to permanent imprisonment on a secured facility station. There would be no execution. President Bae Jino had been clear on this point from the beginning. Humanity would not kill a defeated, unarmed prisoner. That was the line, and they would not cross it, no matter how much the dead deserved it. 1 week after the verdict, Admiral Kang Do-hyun submitted his resignation. He was offered the highest military honors Earth could give: medals, titles, a seat on the Permanent Defense Council. He declined every one. He packed his personal belongings from his quarters on the Iron Promise into a single bag, shook hands with his senior officers, and walked off the ship without looking back. In his final log entry, recorded in his quarters the night before he left, he spoke in the same quiet, steady voice that had commanded 400 warships. "I did what was asked of me. I did it as well as I could. I do not regret it, because it was necessary. But I never want to do it again. The best thing I can wish for the next admiral who sits in this chair is that my skills are never needed, that the fleet stays in the dark, that the weapons stay cold. That is my hope. I suspect it is foolish, but I will hold it anyway." He returned to Earth and bought a small house near the sea in the south. He grew vegetables. He read books. He never gave interviews. Captain Yoon Hana returned to New Busan. The colony had been partially rebuilt. The southern hemisphere, which had survived the bombardment, served as the base for reconstruction. New buildings rose where rubble had been cleared. Farms were replanted, schools reopened. But the northern hemisphere was still scarred and gray, and at its center, on a flat plain where the city center had once stood, a memorial had been built. It was a wall of black stone. It stretched for 3 kilometers in a gentle curve across the plain, and every centimeter of its surface was engraved with names. 800,000 names, carved deep into the stone so that wind and rain would never erase them. At night, small lights embedded in the stone lit each name from below, so the wall glowed softly in the dark, like a river of stars laid flat against the earth. Hana walked along the wall until she found her brother's name, Yoon Sejun. She reached out and placed her palm flat against the stone. She stood there for a very long time, not speaking, not crying, just feeling the letters under her hand. A small sound made her turn. A child stood a few meters away, watching her nervously. The child was Arrow, a young one, with soft green scales and wide, uncertain eyes. An orphan of the war, Hana realized, one of thousands who had been taken in by humanitarian programs after the surrender. The child held out a small white flower with both hands. It was trembling. Hana looked at the flower. She looked at the child. She thought about everything that had happened. She thought about Sojun and his model ships. She thought about the transport full of children she had let pass through the blockade. She thought about what Tae-sun had said at the trial. She knelt down so she was level with the child. She took the flower gently and said, "Thank you." The child gave a tiny nervous nod and ran away. Hana turned back to the wall and tucked the white flower into a small gap in the stone beside her brother's name. It sat there, bright and pale against the black, like a small piece of hope that did not know it was fragile. Dr. Shin Mira oversaw the final stage of Project Godfall's decommissioning. The gravity pulse platforms were powered down, disassembled into components, and sealed inside reinforced vaults buried deep within a dead moon at the edge of the solar system. 1 kilometer of ice and rock was packed on top of them. Automated defense systems were placed around the moon, programmed to destroy anything that approached without the correct authorization codes. The codes themselves were divided into 12 fragments, each held by a different person on Earth and the colonies. All 12 fragments were needed to unlock the vault. No single person, no single government could ever open it alone. Mira wrote the final entry in the project log herself. "We built weapons that can unmake worlds. The only moral act left to us was to ensure they sleep forever, and to remember that we are the kind of species that could build them. I do not know if we are better for having built them and locked them away, or worse, for having built them at all. I suspect the answer is both. She sealed the log, locked her office, and retired from weapons research permanently. She took a teaching position at a university and spent the rest of her career training young scientists. She never spoke publicly about Godfall. 1 year after the war, President Bei Jinho addressed the Galactic Council in person. It was the first time a human leader had stood in the council chamber since Earth went silent. Ambassadors from species that had watched the war from a distance now watched Jinho walk to the central podium with the careful attention of people who had learned painfully to take humanity seriously. Jinho adjusted his glasses. He looked out over the chamber and spoke. "You called us the gentle species. You were not wrong. We are gentle. But we are gentle by choice, not by nature. Every act of mercy that humanity has shown this galaxy was a decision, made consciously, against instincts that were shaped by 10,000 years of war and survival and suffering on a world that tried very hard to kill us. We chose to be kind. We chose to build hospitals instead of weapons, to send doctors instead of soldiers, to answer cruelty with patience. We made that choice every single day, and it was never easy, and it was never weakness." He paused. "And when 800,000 of our people were slaughtered, we chose to respond, not with cruelty, not with genocide, with precision and consequence. Let the record show that we could have burned the Arrow homeworld to glass. We did not. But let the record also show that we could have." His voice dropped. "Do not make us choose again." The chamber was silent for a long time after he finished. Then, starting from the back rows and moving forward, every delegation stood. Not in applause, in acknowledgement, in understanding, in something very close to fear dressed as respect. Years passed. The galaxy changed. Trade routes reopened. Alliances shifted. New crises arose and were resolved. Humanity went back to building hospitals and brokering peace and sending aid to worlds in need. The gentle species returned to being gentle. Something had shifted permanently in the way the galaxy looked at the small blue planet and its strange, smiling people. In a university lecture hall on a council world far from Earth, a young alien student raised her hand and asked her professor a question that had been bothering her. Why has no species ever attacked a human colony again? Not once, in all the years since the war. Why? The professor was old. He had been a junior diplomat during the conflict. He had watched the Battle of the Verath Corridor from a council observation post. He had seen a moon fold itself into nothing. He set down his notes and looked at the student for a moment before answering. Because the humans taught this galaxy the most terrifying lesson in its history. The most dangerous creature in the universe is not the one that loves war. It is the one that loves peace and is willing to stop. The student wrote the answer down, but did not fully understand it. She had grown up in a galaxy at peace. She had never known a time when humans were not the kind, helpful species that showed up first when disaster struck and left last when the rebuilding was done. She could not imagine them any other way. On New Busan, in the soft light of evening, a white flower bloomed beside a boy's name on a wall of black stone. The stars above were quiet. Somewhere out in the dark, locked inside a dead moon under a kilometer of ice, weapons that could break worlds slept in silence, and humanity watched the sky the way it always had. Gently, patiently, with open hands and worn hearts, and a memory that never, ever faded.